Care and SSM Health SLU Hospital. Good morning once again, Dr. Michael Lim.
Good morning.
All right,
Morning.
so a little interesting tidbit of the Donald Trump controversy surrounding his annual physical, and that has to do with this calcium reading?
Yeah.
Is that right?
So there's a test that's been put out there that is basically a coronary CT scan. They
Okay.
call it a CT angiogram. So
Okay.
it's a way of looking at the arteries to the heart without putting catheters inside the body.
Okay.
And one of the things we've been able to do with that test for the longest of time is actually determine calcium, because x-rays are actually really good at looking at hard things like bone, and bone is made of calcium. And so this test has been purported for many years to be able to predict risk from a cardiovascular standpoint. So if you have a higher level of calcium and a calcium score in the several hundreds to thousands, you're at very high risk for having a heart attack or a stroke. On the other end of the equation, the study number that most of us would want to have, if you have a calcium score of 0, you have an extremely low risk of having a heart attack or a stroke.
And that's called a CT scan?
Yeah, or I think the lay term is, a calcium score or
Okay.
a heart scan or that type of thing. The problem with that is that there's a lot of scores in between, and that's what our president's score was. It was in the 300s. So it's certainly not 0,
Right.
and it's certainly not several hundred or thousand. So you get this intermediate thing.
Which it sounds to me like a lot of people get this intermediate score.
Yeah, so this is a common deal with respect to, well, did this actually help you or not? So we got to think about it in a few different folds. Number one, it is a CAT scan. It does produce or cause you to be exposed to radiation. And so the body is exposed to radiation to get it, and it's one of those things we need to think about, especially in terms of cumulative radiation exposure for
So
any
the test
individual
itself is somewhat dangerous, is what
well,
you're saying.
not in as an individual, but how many tests like this do you get in your lifetime?
Right.
Right. So if you were to say, well, let me do this like every year, or every 3 years, or every 5 years, and then that starts adding up. And this isn't the only test you get for radiation. So what if you break your collarbone and then you need an X-ray? Do you need that X-ray? Yes. Does that expose you to radiation?
Right.
Yes. And then that just keeps adding up. So every individual test that we do from a radiology standpoint doesn't necessarily cause undue harm.
Okay.
But there is an issue in terms of background radiation exposure that I think is becoming more and more prevalent. Number two is it actually going to change what you do? So you get a test and you get potential results. Is it actually going to change what you do? And this is, I think, the biggest problem I have in terms of this test. People are looking at it in terms of, oh, I want to know whether my arteries are clean or not. And if I give you a calcium score of 300, they're not clean. Okay, that's not a clean bill of health. That's not normal coronary arteries. You have to have some degree of some buildup of cholesterol plaque that's progressed to get calcium within the arteries. That's the only way that it happens.
Right.
So it's not clean. But even without this test in our president, the lesson is if you just look at the data that the president's physical exam presented us, we would be probably recommending the exact same thing without the calcium score that we would with the calcium score.
Because a 70-year-old man, forget the fact that he's president, a 70-year-old man, probably a score of 300 is probably in the norm there.
Well, there are 70-year-old men who have scores of 0. It is possible. I'm trying to give you and me hope, too,
Right, sure.
that we could achieve
Right, but
that.
right, but I understand
Kelly,
that.
of course, is going to achieve it.
Right, but it isn't off the charts. Oh my goodness,
Correct.
rush this man to the hospital.
Correct. So we focus on the basics, and the basics actually do work. So we focus on numbers. If blood pressure is elevated, we need to get at it. If the weight is elevated, especially abdominal obesity or sort of a little bit more a weight carrying in the mid region, we need to get after that. Exercise more and try to get that off. Cholesterol numbers elevated, get after that. Diet, not necessarily the best possible diet, improve it.
Yeah.
You don't have to make it perfect. None of these things potentially are the things we say, oh, let's make this perfect. But can we improve it? The answer is yes. And if you improve those things, you can improve your risk from a heart standpoint without the test.
Yeah. So you're saying is, great, he got the test, the results are in, but he's not doing anything different because of the results of the test. So why give the test in the first place?
Yeah, well, in full disclosure, I don't know whether he's doing anything different or not, but I think in terms of your listeners, you, me, or Kelly,
Right.
what are we going to be doing? Everybody wants the perfect test to tell me, am I going to have a heart attack? And that test doesn't exist. It's not out there.
Right.
We have to look at all of these other things. And so that discussion is out there, and it's pretty darn good. It's way better than it was 10 years ago. And so I would encourage everybody to have that discussion. Don't go in and ask for the test. Stress tests also have significant problems. They're not necessarily the ones that actually will tell you flat out you're good or you're bad.
Right.
It's not a pass-fail adventure. Tim Russert is the perfect example of somebody in your industry that had a stress test days before he ended up dying of a heart attack.
Right.
So it's not a perfect test. And just because your doctor tells you, oh, I got a yearly stress test, I must be good. No, not necessarily. The yearly stress test is probably not the right thing to be doing. But talking to your doctor and working on your numbers and improving the things you can improve, that's the right thing to do.
That's why we have Dr. Michael Lim with us on the show each and every week, cardiologist with SLU Care and SSM Health SLU Hospital, straight from the doctor's mouth. Doctor, thanks for coming in.
Have a great day.